ES6 destructuring assignment is a super convenient feature that allows you to extract values from arrays or properties from objects into distinct variables. And it does this using a very concise and easy to read syntax. Let's dive in. First, let's look at array destructuring. We'll start by creating a simple array of random things. There we are. That's pretty random. Okay, now let's assign 5 unique variables to each individual array index using destructuring. To do this is really simple. First, we set up a new variable declaration, and instead of a single variable name here, we set it up as an array of variable names, each variable being placed in the index we want to assign the value to. So since that first index is the number 12, I'll name this first variable int12. Since our second index is the letter A, I'll name that variable letter A. Since our third index is an empty object, I'll name that empty object, and so on and so forth. I've named our variables very clearly here to avoid any confusion and to illustrate that these variables can literally be named whatever you want. Finally, we set this entire thing equal to the array we're extracting values from. In our case, the random array. If we print this out, we can see our variables are now equal to the individual array values we assign them to. 12A, empty object, hello, and false. Pretty cool, right? And then we have object destructuring, which works pretty much the same way. Let's say we have a person object, and that object has a name property, an age property, and a profession property. And let's say we want to create a variable for each of those properties. Well, we can use object destructuring to extract those properties from the object and assign them to variables. So we'll set up a new variable declaration just like we did before. However, this time, instead of using square brackets, we use curly brackets since we're working with an object. Everything else is the same. If we log this out, we see it works as we would expect. All of our variables have been populated and the code is extremely clean and concise. You can also assign default values during deconstruction, a really valuable capability in cases where some of your object properties just may not be defined. For example, if we were to do the following destructuring against an empty object, then we'll notice that our default values are what's assigned to our variables. However, if we were to update our object to include, say, the age property and set it to 30, we see now that's the value that's used instead of our default. Last but not least, we have nested destructuring for the more complicated objects. For this example, bear with me, let's say we have an object called data, and data has a user property. And let's say that user property is another object with 3 properties of its own: first name, last name, and hobbies. And finally, let's say the hobbies property is an array of values. Using destructuring, there's no limit to how deep our assignments can go. In fact, if we wanted to, we could extract the entire thing into variables. Here, check this out. We'll create a new constant and set it equal to data. Then we'll basically mimic the data object, defining each of the variable names we wish to create. Notice how once we get to the hobbies array, we move from using the curly brackets back to using the square brackets. That's because we need to destructure an array and not an object. From there, it's just a matter of deciding variable names for each of the array indexes. If we print that out, there we go. John Doe reading, traveling. John Doe reading, traveling. Pretty cool, right? I think this is so awesome. Okay, so let's recap the key benefits of destructuring assignment. Number 1, destructuring assignment offers a more concise and expressive way to extract values from arrays and objects. Number 2, it helps reduce code repetition, which ultimately means fewer lines of code overall. And finally, number 3, it simplifies the process of working with those super complicated data structures by allowing for easy extraction of the specific values that you need.